And welcome back to another episode of the Total Sports Live podcast. This is Jovan Alford, who I'm joined by my guy Harrison Brown. As we're going to talk about the NFL draft, which is set for next month in Kansas City. This draft class is shaping up to be very, very good, especially at the quarterback position, where we could see as many as 4 quarterbacks go in the first round, which is way higher than what we saw last year, where it was only one, even though you could make the case that Desmond Ridder could have been a first round pick or even Malik Willis. But that's neither here nor there here on this episode of the podcast. And like I said, today we're going to talk about, or tonight after recording this, we're going to talk about our quarterback rankings, excuse me. Also, we're going to look at some other quarterbacks to look out for that we're going to highlight that we've been watching just over the last couple of days, few weeks that me and Harrison's been talking about. And we're going to go over some draft news. Obviously, the combine is here. Combine drill start Thursday, I believe. So great time to get a podcast. And we're going to talk about the latest news that's coming out the combine as well. However, before we do all of that stuff, make sure you're following us on Twitter at Total Sports Live. Check out totalsportslive.com as well. Trust me, we'll be getting some stuff up there, draft news, free agency news. Eagles should be very busy in free agency. Got a lot of dudes to re-sign, some dudes to bring in, some guys to let go. So it's going to be a busy month here with free agency. I think starting this month, right? Free agency does start this month, right? So, so it's going to be a very busy time here, and you don't want to miss it. So totalsportslive.com, at Total Sports Live on Twitter. And also make sure you're checking out the podcast, because best believe we are now in the season where we are going to start pumping out these podcasts. Doesn't matter what topic it is in sports, we're going to be talking about it here on the pod. So make sure you're following the podcast on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and lastly on Anchor. And check out the podcast as well on YouTube. So as we're recording this, and obviously for folks that will be watching this, it will be on YouTube. Just search Harrison Brown-Russo on the YouTube. He's like a YouTube star a little bit. He got the views going up on some of his draft breakdowns on guys you should watch out for, which have been just rising. His subscriber count's going up. So if you want to check out the podcast on video, you can check it out there on YouTube. All right, I think I'm done all of that. So, like I said, I'm here with Harrison. Harrison, how are you doing? It's been a minute since last time we did a pod. I think it was like the mega Super Bowl pod that we did a podcast, and obviously things didn't go well after that for our Eagles, and we were supposed to talk about it again, but that's okay. We're turning the page. We're getting ready for the draft, and yeah, I'm excited, but glad to have you on as always to talk some football.
Likewise, man. Great to be here with you. Like you said, Super Bowl didn't go our way, but you know what? The Eagles have 2 first-round picks this year, so we're on the draft season entirely. And talking about the quarterbacks tonight, this quarterback class, I mean, like you said, at least 4 guys, maybe even more who could be first-round picks. So this is going to be a fun one. I'm very, very excited for this podcast with you tonight.
Yeah, it definitely, it like you said, it should be a fun one. Like you said, we could see 4 quarterbacks going in the first round. We kind of know where 2 of them will likely go, but the other 2 is the mystery. We don't know if the other 2 are going to be in the top 10. Do they go top 15? Do they slide down the board? It's all going to happen. All the up and down in the mock draft where people have these guys mocked. It's all going to change over the next few weeks. So we're going to break it down all on here on the podcast. And speaking of the quarterbacks, we got to talk about some latest NFL draft news. Like I said, since we are on to the combine this week, and some of the latest news that's coming out of the combine in Indianapolis is that CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, and Will Levis, some of the top quarterbacks in this year's draft class, will all throw at the combine. However, Bryce Young won't, but he will throw at Alabama Pro Day. Obviously, Young is at Indianapolis. I think he's doing the interviews and stuff like that, but he won't be throwing. There. The quarterbacks are scheduled to throw on Saturday. So Harrison, Stroud, Richardson, Levis all thrown at the combine. Obviously, I don't think Stroud needs to prove anything throwing the ball, but I definitely think a lot of people are going to be tuned in to see how Richardson, especially Richardson, because everybody knows the type of arm that he has, but also people probably want to see Levis to see how he can throw, because there's a lot of people that are also in the Will Levis should be a top 10, pick as well.
I think it's 3 guys who are going to put on a show. I think when you look at CJ Stroud, I think it's going to be a lot of accuracy. I think he's going to really display his pinpoint accuracy. Deep balls working over the middle of the field. That's what I really love about CJ Stroud, his touch and accuracy. And then you look at Richardson and Levis. Those are guys who are going to throw a lot of fastballs. Those are guys who are going to put on the display with their velocity, their arm strength, trying to throw the ball 70 yards, 65 yards, really putting on that type of display. And like you mentioned, Bryce Young's going to throw at his pro day. Another guy who I think is really going to put on a show. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. If you like watching pro days and combine workouts, if that's your thing at the quarterback position, it's going to be a lot of fun. And we've seen it really impact draft stock over the years. I think back to Zach Wilson's pro day at BYU a few years ago and how that really elevated his draft stock. Maybe, you know what I mean? Maybe for bad reasons. Maybe that shouldn't have been the case looking at it when you start talking about Justin Fields, who also put on a show at his pro day and had some ridiculous throws. So, yeah, it's definitely, I think those three guys at the combine especially, I think they're going to put on a show. And overall, it's a good batch of quarterbacks at the combine. I think the on-field portion of the combine, I think there's going to be a lot of people who put on good displays.
Yeah, it should be fun. I can't wait to check that out on a Saturday. Luckily, the XFL doesn't come on until later on Saturday. So
Smart
we can get
the
XFL. We can get our combine quarterback watching it, then we can pivot to the XFL on Saturday night, later tonight. So definitely should be fun to see those guys throwing the football. And speaking of quarterbacks, we also got to talk about one team who's considering drafting a quarterback. However, they likely will resign their quarterback, and that is the Seattle Seahawks. Brady Henderson, ESPN reporter for Seahawks ESPN reporter, wrote a story a couple of days ago, well, actually yesterday, about the Seahawks, saying that they're considering drafting a quarterback amid positive Geno Smith talks. Henderson said the Seahawks are working to re-sign Pro Bowl quarterback Geno Smith, but general manager John Snyder and head coach Pete Carroll said that isn't stopping the team from taking a hard look at this year's quarterback class. Snyder on Tuesday described the contract talk with Geno Smith, who won Comeback Player of the Year, as positive thus far. A lot of people also got to remember here in the situation, Seahawks have 2 first-round picks this year, 5th and number 20th. Over 20th overall. Pete Carroll told reporters at the Scouting Combine in Indianapolis that we are totally connected to the quarterbacks that are coming out. This is a really huge opportunity for us. It's a rare opportunity. We've been drafting in the low 20s for such a long time. You just don't get the chance with these. Guys. So we're deeply involved with that. And even John Snyder, he gave his thoughts as well about their draft position and also this year's quarterback class. He said a lot when asked how much the Seahawks are looking at this year's quarterback class. Every year, honestly, we really look at it a lot. Like I said earlier, we haven't picked 5th overall since we've been here. So yeah, I got out to see a lot of the quarterbacks this year. It was pretty fun, but honestly, every year we tried to do that. We tried to add quarterbacks. So Harrison, the Seahawks, they do have they reportedly having positive talks with, Geno Smith. And I think we both probably think that they will resign Geno, who had a very good year for him and really stepped up and probably gave himself another at least few years to starting in the NFL. However, Seahawks also have to think about the future as well. Would you be surprised? Are you surprised to hear them saying that they are considering drafting a quarterback? And if not, who do you think that they could potentially go with if they were to stay at number 5?
I'm not surprised to hear them saying it. I'd be surprised if they drafted someone at 5. I'd be surprised if they pick a quarterback at 5. But like you said, I think they'll get the deal done with Geno. I think he proved a lot of things this year that he can run their offense and move forward from there. With that said, he's in his 30s. It's something to at least consider, the long-term, stability of the position. And like they said, they're not expecting to be picking at 5 ever again in an ideal world, unless they pull off a trade like this again. But in an ideal world, they're not picking at 5 again. So you have to consider it. And like he said, I think most teams in the NFL are looking around at different quarterbacks every year, even for their long term. You look at, some of these journeyman quarterbacks, and even at this point, guys like Carson Wentz, he's going to be going to his 4th team in 4 years. You probably think about it, the Colts, the Commanders, they probably looked at him at least in their North Dakota pro days, and they know they might not be drafting him, but you look around, so that part of it makes sense. I'd be surprised if Seattle picks someone at 5. I feel very comfortable, confident with Geno Smith going back as their quarterback next year. However, they have 3 picks early in the draft. I'm really intrigued with the idea for them. You go either best defensive player available at 5, maybe a guy like Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech, if Miles Murphy falls, he could be a good pick. At 20, go get someone else, maybe on defense. Maybe you add to what you have with Tariq Woolen at corner. Go out and add another corner.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued with the idea of them getting Darnell Washington from Georgia, tight end. So I kind of like that idea. I kind of like the idea of them stacking up on two more really solid draft prospects, because you look at their draft last year. Charles Cross, immediate starter at left tackle, immediate impact player. Abe Lucas, immediate starter at right tackle. They locked down their tackle situation in 1 year. Like I already mentioned, Tariq Woolen, starting corner, one of the best rookie corners in the NFL outside of Sauce Gardner.
Day three,
exactly. So I'm kind of intrigued with that part of it. I think you've got the quarterback at least for this year, next year, in Geno Smith. Add two more really solid defensive players. With that third pick in the second round, that's when I start thinking about it, because you've already added two rookies. You had a nice rookie class last year. You've kind of afforded yourself that luxury to consider a quarterback there. If someone slips into that second round, I'm intrigued with it. Even day three, fourth round, fifth round, I could see the Seahawks going with someone there. I don't really see it at 5, and I don't really see it at 20 either. I like the idea of them getting two prospects to help Geno Smith next year.
Me too. I like it. I like it too. Honestly, I really do. And like you said, for them, it wasn't so much offensively for them as we saw in the playoffs. Defensively, they needed to add, some more playmakers here. Like you said, Tariq Woolen is a great start. To have a find like that in day 3, an athlete, an athletic cornerback with size, to hit on him, great start. Now, what else can you add? Right, like you said, you were able to hit with Lucas and Cross, which is hard to do, right? It's hard to hit on both tackles, and they were able to do that, which kind of helped and sped up, their progress. And don't forget, they also drafted Kenneth Walker too.
Oh, so that's a great one. I forgot about him.
They really added a lot to offense. Now it's time to get, like you said, those playmakers on defense. And if you're the Seahawks, if there's an outstanding guy at linebacker or on the line, you got to consider him. Like you said, right? A Miles Murphy, or if with teams running and gunning for quarterbacks, maybe you end up with a Will Anderson. Could you imagine Will Anderson, with Jordan Brooks when he's healthy? That's a very scary, combination to think about. And then, like you said, at 20, you can kind of go BPA, best player available, or you could luck up and get a corner. Right, this cornerback class has been said that this is a very good cornerback class. Now it remains to be seen if how many of the good corners are left at 20. But 20, like you said, gives them kind of a wiggle room to where they can kind of go BPA. And if that is a Darnell Washington, I don't think Seahawks fans will be mad at that.
I think there's a chance that they add two really good players and go BPA, best player available at both spots. Like you said, if Will Anderson slips to 5, it's almost a no-brainer. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
you don't think twice. You don't think twice.
Exactly. So, and you never know who's going to fall to 20. We've seen it so many different years where guys fall to that 20 spot. So I think there's a real opportunity that they could really bolster their team and have a great young core with a lot of their superstars on rookie deals. Like I said, I don't know how I forgot about Kenneth Walker. Probably the best rookie in that class, maybe. It might feel like he's been in the NFL for a few years, the way he was running last year. So, yeah, like I said, all those guys on rookie deals, 2 more, and 3 more really, but at least 2 more position players coming in on rookie deals. Maybe then you start to consider the quarterback with that third pick. But, yeah, I'm a big fan of where the Seahawks could really position themselves if they have a good draft.
Me too. Definitely will be interesting to see, because they, almost like how we said with the Eagles last year, their draft spot, they kind of control the draft. Seahawks at 5 kind of control the draft. Whatever they do will send the domino effect down the board, especially for teams, again, looking for quarterbacks. They
could be saying that they're looking at all these quarterbacks and they're really considering a quarterback to try to bolster up their trade value, to try to make that 5th pick even more valuable. A team
because they could trade back.
Exactly.
And still end up with a good defensive player.
If Carolina wants someone, they have the 9th pick. They can certainly work something out to get to 5th. If the Jets want someone in this draft, if they're in love with Anthony Richardson, they can move up from 13. So there's a lot of different possibilities. It's definitely an intriguing pick. The Raiders at 7, they could move up. So a lot of options.
And then you still end up with a very standout defensive player, right?
Exactly.
Like you said, if it's a Miles Murphy or a Tyree Wilson or even a corner, right? The Devin Witherspoons or the Joey Porter Juniors, right? You could still end up with guys. Cam Smith, you add that, you're in very great shape. So like we said, Seahawks hold the keys to probably how the rest of the draft will fall in that top 10. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, or if we hear any more or see any more news coming out of Seattle about quarterbacks, or even if they work out some guys, which will be very telling too when we get to that portion, if they work out some quarterbacks. So moving on from the news portion, we got to get to the main topic of tonight's podcast, and that is the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL draft. And I know everybody has their own top 10 list. Most of the top 10 lists, they all look the same. Everybody has the same order. Not many people are willing to, fall on the sword and be different. There's few and far in between are different. Emory Hunt's probably the most different because he grades and watches all different quarterbacks from all different levels, talking D1, FCS, D2, D3, NAIA. I mean, U Sports, the dude does it all. And if you've been listening to the Ross Tucker pod, the college draft pod with him and Ross, he has a very interesting, but I think a very good quarterback list because it gives you variety on a lot of the guys and some names you don't know in this draft class. And that's what we kind of did too with our list. Harrison has been working very diligently on his rankings. He's had these rankings really set up since like the beginning of this year, late last year. Trust me, like when I tell you, like the spreadsheet has been up. Like he has spreadsheets for this year's draft class, next year's draft class, Ivy League transfers, XFL, USFL draft, which I started adding to last week with the USFL guys. No problem. So definitely a lot of different things when we talk about this year's draft class. So without further ado, here are Harrison's top 10 quarterbacks from this year's draft class. We'll probably just call this the official TSL draft quarterback rankings for all we know. So number 1, we got Bryce Young. Number 2, C.J. Stroud. Number 3, Hendon Hooker out of Tennessee, which is very interesting because some probably have him a little bit lower due to the injury that he did suffer at Tennessee. Number 4, we have Anthony Richardson. Number 5, Will Levis from Kentucky. Number 6, Malik Willis. Malik Cunningham. Malik Cunningham.
He was on my list last year. Malik Willis.
Yeah,
he was.
We still have hope. We still have hope in Malik. Yep. Trust me. I am copping up on rookie cards as we speak.
Smart. Malik. That's a good play.
I'm getting ahead, just like how I got ahead on Justin Fields.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah,
I jumped on Justin Fields and then literally started going off rookie cards. And went, shoo, I was like, thank goodness I got my Justin Fields rookie card just in time. So number 7, we got Jaron Hall from BYU. Number 8, Tommy DeVito, formerly he finished his college career at Illinois, but formerly of Syracuse, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Syracuse. Number 9, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, DTR, UCLA. Number 10, Max Duggan from TCU. I'll say Tennessee, TCU. Number 11, Lindsey Scott Jr., Incarnate Word, FCS Player of the Year, Walter Payton. I think he won the Walter Payton Award in FCS, which is the equivalent to the Heisman. Very decorated quarterback in the FCS ranks. You could argue probably one of the best small school quarterbacks in this year's draft class that a lot of people aren't talking about. And then number 12, we have Jake Hayner out of Fresno State. So before we jump into your, rankings, talking about Richardson and Levis and Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud, Harrison, when you put together your rankings, what were you kind of like looking at as you were putting these guys together? Like, did you have a grading system? Were you saying, or I'm watching like 3 games of each guy? Like, what went to you, like, kind of throwing a rankings together? Because for a lot of people, they just read what everybody else writes and be like, all right, I saw Mel Kiper. I saw dudes on NFL.com say this. So these are like this is how like my rankings would go.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm trying to get as many game films watched as possible. I'm trying to watch full games film, every throw, run, handoff, all that. I'm trying to see how a quarterback operates the entire game. So with that being said, it's really, rankings are always subjective for everyone. For every draft analyst you're going to find, you go from the top at Mel Kiper to Joe Schmo in Nebraska. Every single ranking is going to be subjective, and we've seen it over the course of years.
Shout out to Joe Schmo, by the way.
Shout out to Joe Schmo. He does his best. You know what I mean? He puts together good rankings. He's watching the highlight tapes. You got to respect it. But look at how the 2018 class played out. I mean, Josh Rosen wound up being the 3rd quarterback selected. Baker Mayfield's 1st. Sam Darnold 2nd. Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson are behind him. And I think a lot of folks were pretty comfortable with the way that draft went. Baker won the Heisman. Sam Darnold was talked about as the best quarterback in the class. So it's always going to be subjective. Really what I'm looking for is a consistent quarterback that I think can help an NFL team. That's kind of how these rankings played out. That's why people, immediately the first thing you're probably going to hear is Hendon Hooker at 3. He's 25 years old, coming off a torn ACL. I hear all that. I get all that. I look at him as a consistent quarterback who could come in and help an NFL team probably quicker than the likes of Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, Malik Cunningham. I think Hendon Hooker could come in and help an NFL team. So that's really what I'm looking for. Consistency, and just overall of being an NFL-ready quarterback.
I think those are very good standards. I think there's very good standards because, like I said, some people try to get super analytical. Like they jump to the numbers. They look at, passing yards expected. Like they try to get into these whole type of things instead of looking at just the eye test, right? Or, you got to some folks that be like, well, you're not really watching anything if you don't have the all 22. And it's just like, hey, man, some of us doesn't have the capability to get to that. But we do have, like you said, we do have like the ESPN Plus where we can go back and watch games, or, we do have YouTube, which, a lot of people do a great job while they don't have the all 22 people on YouTube. I think most YouTubers do a great job of, when it comes to quarterbacks, just like cutting up, just like every throw, like they're screening every throw to kind of paint the picture out there. And even if it's only 6 minutes, sometimes that's all you need when you're, looking at these guys.
Oh, definitely. And I like watching the Skycast. You mentioned ESPN Plus. That's a really good way of kind of simulating what that all 22 angle looks like. Another thing I'm really big on is mechanics and fundamentals. That's something I'm real nitpicky about, and then I'm big on, and just something that I kind of know a little bit more than maybe the X's and O's. Well, Florida runs this scheme and they do this and this.
You're right.
That's not really my, forte. I think a lot of people that know me will kind of tell you that, but I can definitely tell you a lot, especially when it's coming to the quarterback position, about arm mechanics and footworks and things of that nature. So that's definitely something I'm looking for as well. Rewatching throws a couple of different times, even watching screens and quick hitches, just kind of seeing what the fundamentals are. That's something that I'm really, particularly at the quarterback position, big on.
That's why I leave it to him, right? He can break down the quarterback game to a nuance. I'm more of a like cut and dry type of person. Like he didn't do this well, he did this well, he did this well. And I try to speak in like the layman terms for the layman term football fan. But that's
You're being
okay.
Humble. This is one of my favorite guys to go back and forth with on draft stuff. It has been for years. This is probably the 5th draft class where we've really been back and forth on who should the Eagles get, what do you think about this quarterback? So I'm very excited to hear your thoughts on this is going to be a very fun conversation talking about these quarterbacks right here. We got a lot to go over.
Yeah, for sure. And let's jump right into it. Talking about Anthony Richardson and Will Levis, I feel like, and you likely will agree with this, these are probably the two most talked about quarterbacks in this class, right? Because we know about Stroud, we know about Bryce Young, we know about those two guys set in stone. Like we know these are the cream of the crop, like top 2, 1, 2, 1A, 1B. Those are those guys. However, Richardson and Levis, a lot of people don't know which way that can go, right? Some people are very strong in the Levis camp, while other people are very strong in the Richardson side of things. When you look at these two guys, and you had a chance to look at both of these guys, Richardson at Florida, Levis at Kentucky, both played in the SEC. Good defenses in the SEC, by the way, which kind of make things a little bit easier to kind of figure these things out about these guys. What did you see from both of them as as we got ready for this podcast, and just for your overall notes?
Yeah, so I remember we talked in September, right before they actually played Kentucky and Florida. And I think I said to you, it kind of reminds me of when Malik Willis and Matt Corral played last year, Ole Miss and Liberty. It's nice when two quarterbacks go head-to-head like that. Bryce Young and Hendon Hooker were another example of that. When I look at these two guys, I see, honestly, kind of two similar guys. They have a similar frame. They're in that 6'4", 232 range. Same with Levis. I think the big thing with both of them is arm talent. They both have tremendous arm talent. Where I think it really separates, I think Anthony Richardson is a second, that upper tier athlete compared to Levis. I don't think Levis is in that same caliber, and he gets a lot of credit, as if he is a really elite athlete. Didn't really have much going in the run game this year. For Will Levis, longest rush of the year, 24 yards, only 2 rushing touchdowns. I think they're both talented quarterbacks. I have first-round grades on both of them. I think Richardson, I feel more comfortable if I'm the Carolina Panthers. At 9, I'd feel more comfortable taking Richardson. I think he has more upside, not only with his athletic ability. I think he has more upside as a passer as well. He has an electric arm. It really, there's no throw on the field Anthony Richardson can't make. Where I get concerned is really the easy throws right now. And that can be a good thing. That doesn't necessarily, that's very easily coachable. I'm more concerned if he's missing deep throws and making bad reads. It's really the swings, the screens, the hitches, the ball placement on them. It's inaccurate. It's kind of sporadic. I really want to see him get his lower body kind of intact. I want him to go to a team where there's a good quarterback coach. That's why I kind of mentioned the Carolina Panthers, Frank Reich, working with Josh McCown as well. I think that would be a really good fit. I think they could take his game to the next level because with a little bit of polishing, I really think he's the superstar of the class. Like there's a legit case. You said Bryce Young and CJ Stroud locked in 1A, 1B. I agree with you. That's how I have them ranked as well. I think they're the two most ready guys. In 2 or 3 years, it could be, how did we not all say Anthony Richardson? Why were we worried about a couple games? Florida State, he didn't complete that many passes. Why were we worried about that? So there's definitely that conversation there. I think right now, at his age, at his current state, probably not ready to start in the NFL at this moment. I think if he did, he'd make some plays. There would be Bleacher Report and ESPN highlights from every game he played. He's got an electric arm. He can go and run for 70-plus yards. I mean, back in 2021, when he was splitting time with Emory Jones, that was really what he did. The first 2 weeks, he had over 100 yards both games, had 70-plus yard touchdowns in both of those games. He's an electric athlete. He's tough in the red zone with his size at 6'4", 232, and then his electric arm as well. It can be really tough. If you polish up that accuracy, especially when we're talking about the red zone play, I mean, how do you stop him? If he's accurate with as strong an arm as he has and then his athletic ability and his physical stature as well, a lot of upside there. I think he has more upside than Levis. That's why I have it Richardson then Levis. Not to say that I'm out on Levis at all. I think he's a talented quarterback. I think he generates a lot of power in his throws easily. It doesn't take a lot of, torque or motion. He can really just grip it and sling it just like that. I'm a fan of him as well. I think he's a little bit more capped, though. I think with Anthony Richardson, the sky is the limit. I think with Will Levis, there's probably a ceiling on it. There's probably, a final destination where he is. I still think he's a guy who could win games in the NFL. We're going to talk about this throughout the night. It's all situational, though. When you look at these two guys, we're breaking them down right now. It all comes down to situation, though.
Yeah, and I think, and that's the thing with, just all, quarterbacks, right? Where you get drafted, where's the best situation that you can thrive in? Because we've seen just over the countless of years, right? Shoot, we talk about it before the show, Malik Willis, right? A guy that has the talent, has the upside, but doesn't end up in the right spot where he can be developed and kind of, worked in. It's kind of like they didn't really, when he did get in for Tannehill, when Tannehill was hurt, they didn't really tailor the offense around him. So that kind of stunted his growth to the point where they had to go get a Josh Dobbs and start him, the second week before the regular season ended, and then the regular season finale with a chance to go to the playoffs. So shows you how much they did not do to help him. But again, a quarterback that maybe you put him in a different situation. I'm trying to think of a team potentially if you
even if Tennessee would just tailor it more, I mean? Yeah.
Or maybe if he went to somewhere like a Detroit where he wouldn't start obviously behind Goff, but a place where he learns something, can play in a quarterback friendly offense. I feel like that's what Detroit is, a quarterback friendly offense with the weapons and the pieces, but also having a solid running game to do that. And I think that's also didn't help Malik Willis either. The weapons, there wasn't really a lot of weapons there, at Tennessee. Obviously you have Derrick Henry, right? But wide receiver, Treylon Burks, up and down rookie year. But outside of Treylon, who else are you dependent on? Robert Woods wasn't himself really. Nick Westbrook-Ikine really didn't really do anything. I mean, it was nice to see Chig Okonkwo really come up huge, and that's a guy that I think can take that next step and next level when we talk about tight ends going into the second year. But he came on late, so a lot of things didn't work out in Willis' favor. You hope it's better, and you hope, like we said, for Levis and Richardson, that wherever they land at, you hope that they land in a situation where, number one, they don't have to start right away, like Willis, don't have to start right away, but they'll be in a spot where they'll be able to develop and be in a situation where if they do have to start, it won't look like they have a deer in headlights. Because I feel like with Ritter, there wasn't no deer in headlights. When I even with Pickett, I didn't feel like it was a deer in headlights. When it was Willis, I felt like it was a deer in headlights.
And I think that's in part because they really didn't set him up for success there. I don't think that that's necessarily all on Malik Willis at all. When we talk about kind of situations and maybe a spot where someone could sit for a little bit, it's going to be lower on him than where a lot of the mocks are projecting him and where a lot of rankings. but I would love Will Levis in LA behind Matt Stafford. If he falls to that second round, their first pick, I mean, I think at some point they're going to have to start looking for another quarterback of the future. Yeah. Definitely would be an interesting one. I've also looked at the Saints at 29. Like we mentioned, if they go out and get a veteran quarterback but decide, hey, let's go get someone younger, I could see Levis sliding into that back end of the first round and being there at 29. And then I mentioned it, the fit that I like for Richardson is kind of Carolina at 9. That's something I've been putting together some mocks. That's something that's coming out this month on the YouTube and TSL. First round mock drafts coming out. Haven't even told you this, Jovan, but 7-round mock draft is coming out in April. You know what I mean? Get ready for that one. That's going to take some hours. Yeah, exactly. All right, typing away. But yeah, that's the spot that I keep coming back to for Richardson is 9 with Carolina. I feel pretty comfortable. I think Anthony Richardson is a top 10 quarterback. With that being said, I do have Hendon Hooker above him. Not saying I think Hendon Hooker will go in the top 10. I think with the torn ACL and him being 25 years old, I don't really see it there. But I do have Hendon Hooker above Anthony Richardson right now.
And I think it's because, like you said, you preference that as more pro ready right away.
Yeah.
To step in. Like if he went somewhere day 3 and we had situations where quarterbacks get hurt, someone gets hurt, hey, we can turn to Hendon and just let him just manage the game, manage the offense.
Well, with that said, I love Hendon Hooker's skill set, though, and I love it post-torn ACL, too. I'm not all that concerned about that. In today's day and age, we're seeing more and more guys come back as strong, if not stronger, from torn ACL. So I'm not that concerned about that, and I really do. I like Hendon Hooker's game a lot. I think a lot of the traits that people are really high on Will Levis and Anthony Richardson on, Hendon Hooker is 6'4" as well. You know, Hendon Hooker is not a small quarterback by any means.
No.
Hendon Hooker is an athletic quarterback, a guy who can run. Had 25 career rushing touchdowns, spanning between Virginia Tech and Tennessee. Like I mentioned, spent 4 seasons at Virginia Tech and then 2 at Tennessee. An experienced guy, kind of the buzz that Kenny Pickett got last year. Started a lot of games, played a lot of games. Hendon Hooker, 8,974 career passing yards, 80 career touchdowns with a 67% career completion percentage. This year, before the ACL injury, 27 touchdowns and 2 interceptions in 11 games. I'm a big fan of him. I think he's underrated right now. We talked about it earlier in the show. Seattle in that second round range, if they're looking for a quarterback and Hendon Hooker is still there all day. I don't know if everyone's going to love this, but I've always thought that the Vikings should go and get a younger quarterback. I really liked it when the Vikings had Kellen Mond behind Kirk Cousins. If they're in the second round, if they want to move up in the second round to go get Hendon Hooker, I'm all aboard on that. Would love to see him working with Kevin O'Connell. And like I mentioned for Levis, the Rams would be another really good fit. You know, if Matthew Stafford were to miss time, I mentioned it. I think Hendon Hooker is the 3rd most pro-ready quarterback in this draft class. I think that he could step in somewhere and contribute. So there's a lot of fits like that. I'm a big fan of Hendon Hooker. I'm not overly concerned about the torn ACL. Brandon Weeding got drafted at like 28 years old, so I'm not overly concerned.
Never forget.
So I'm not overly concerned about Hendon Hooker being 25 years old, especially in a league where you really only have 2 years to get it going anyway. Josh Rosen got a season, and Zach Wilson's 2 years in, and nobody's considering him as the Jets starting quarterback. So I'm not overly concerned about that.
Yeah, me either. So I think that's gonna be one of the cases to watch for, because if we hear that his testing's going well, that the knee is good, the ACL, he could be a guy that slides back in on that day 2, right? Back in day 3, you hear Hendon Hooker, or he's getting picked up in round 4, open up day 3. I think he's going to be someone to watch out for, and someone that I think we're going to hear from, this summer, and hopefully, in the preseason when we get to see him, play. And for me, haven't really got a chance to watch Will Levis yet. Just put that out there for clarity, and just want to put that out there. However, I did have a chance to check out some of Anthony Richardson before the pod. Haven't got to my 3rd game yet, but did check out 2 games. The first one against Florida State, and the first one, and then the other game against Kentucky. Both games where he struggled accuracy wise, and we know accuracy is something that people kind of nick Anthony Richardson for. But I feel like at the same time, while yes, he did complete only 53.8% of his passes for 2,549 yards, 17 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 654 rushing yards, and 9 TDs. I feel like when we look at accuracy, and I feel like this is just quarterbacking in general. We kind of have to look at it in a microscope. Like, not all quarterback accuracies are the same. And I think Richardson is that. For as much people want to knock him for it, you have to look at the nature of how those incompletes happen, right? So that's what I did, because when you look at that Florida State game, that probably was one of his worst days throwing the football this season. 9 of 27 for 198 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. I went through and I think I at least logged at least 10 incompletions just to see what they were. And obviously this is not me talking from coach's speak when I was writing. It's just writing down as a regular person. So first completion, I said first one's completion. It was pressure in his face. Pressure causes incompletions. Second incompletion, the shovel pass. He tried to get out of pressure, tried to shovel it, just didn't work. Third incompletion, off the wide receiver's hands. Fourth incompletion, ball hits wide receiver in the hands. Fifth incompletion, you mentioned this when you talk about the short passes and trying to make those layup throws. Screen pass behind the running back. Sixth incompletion, pressure. Seventh incompletion, ball sailed down on the wide receiver on a bubble screen. Towards the ball, steps out, turns his body, tried to throw it, ball sails down, can't get it done on the bubble screen. Another incompletion, the wideout slips. He throws the ball deep, the wideout slips. And then that's pretty much all I have for incompletions. And just from that game alone, some of the other things that I wrote down, from that game is, he has a big arm, flick of the wrist. For some reason I wrote Dante Culpepper. Don't know why, but it was like, I thought of Dante Culpepper with the big arm for some reason. Like, that was the first thing I thought about, especially with his size, right? 6'4", 232, 236. I said he can make throws in the middle of the field. I didn't like that he took big hits in that game, and I think that's something he will learn. I feel like even when I was watching the Kentucky game, took some big hits. He'll learn that he can't take those, type of hits. And then I think I did, and like you said, I said must get better with the short throws. I feel like he leaves a lot of money on the table with those because of good especially with how good his arm is, how much of a howitzer that he has on his arm. I did say he has a strong runner, especially when the short yardage, or that one play where they had to go, I think it was on third down, and he pushed the pile and he kept pushing. I wrote Jalen Hurts. That's something that Jalen Hurts did really well. And then I said compact throwing motion reminds me of Vince Young. The way that he had that throwing motion reminds me a lot from Vince Young. And even when I look at the second game versus Kentucky, again, wasn't a game where he didn't throw the ball particularly well, right? 14 to 35, 143 yards, 2 interceptions. I said solid footwork, inaccurate on the intermediate and deep routes in that game. Didn't think he did a good job there. He throws a good ball, though. I will say that.
He really
both
does.
games, he does throw a really good catchable ball. Like, if you're a wide receiver, like, the way that ball spins, like, it's beautiful to watch the way the ball spins coming out of his hands. I said sometimes he has too much zip on his arm, which is a good thing. But you have a big arm, it's a good in the bat with that. However, I do also feel like some of the inaccuracies and completion that he did have, I think the offensive line, left a lot to be desired too. I don't think Florida had the best offensive line this year. Just looking at just those 2 games so far, he threw a couple interceptions. And the first interception, defender sat in the flat and just grabbed it. It was a ridiculous play. If you see it, it was just a ridiculous interception that he had. And then second interception, I said miscommunication. Wide receiver kept running, and DB just sat in flat and sat in the cloud and just picked it off. So that's how I feel about Richardson. And just the criticism that people have about Richardson. We didn't have this criticism about Josh Allen. And Josh Allen inaccuracies was not good in college, right? His sophomore year, his redshirt sophomore year, because obviously he went to JUCO, 2016, 56% completion percentage, 3,200 yards, 28 touchdowns, 15 interceptions. However, his final year in Wyoming, obviously the year he came out, 56.3 completion percentage, 1,812 yards, 6 touchdowns, 16 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. So you tell me, last year, 56% completion percentage, almost 2,000 passing yards, 16 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Anthony Richardson, While his completion percentage is lower, he has more passing yards, has one more touchdown, a few more interceptions, and he had more rushing yards and more rushing touchdowns than Josh Allen. So why are we having this discussion about his inaccuracy?
I think if you're an NFL team, you look at it as you're willing to excuse some errors that the team is making. Like you mentioned, the offensive line's not the best. You mentioned it in that, a couple incompletions that you had charted, a lot of drop passes, a lot of quick, easy throws. These are things that are coachable. These are things that if you're on, an offensive system that's really rolling, similar to what Brock Purdy stepped into this year in San Francisco, that type of stuff gets cleaned up. That type of stuff really gets worked on. So, like we mentioned, wouldn't mind Richardson maybe spending a year developing. We saw Patrick Mahomes do it, Aaron Rodgers do it. I think there's nothing wrong with that at all. If the situation allows it, I think it's something that benefits quarterbacks, makes them better. Wouldn't mind Richardson taking a year to develop, but I think he has top 10 traits, top 10 upside. I think there's a lot of things to love about his game. And like we've been mentioning, the flaws, the things that people are criticizing, I think it's very coachable. I think it could be easily fixed, even within a couple weeks in offseason OTAs, training camp, mini camp. Like, I don't think it's huge, fatal flaws. Like, oh my gosh, this is always going to be a problem. There's no way to fix it. I think he can really improve on his accuracy and be a superstar dynamic quarterback. It's just a matter of him taking that step and being in the right situation.
No, definitely. And I mean, even when we look at Josh Allen, right, for his inaccuracies, his first year in the NFL, 52.8%, 58.8% second year. However, 2020, 69%. And then the last couple of years has went down, but that's because he just has that YOLO mentality where he throws past where he doesn't need to. But you did see a gradual progression from rookie year to now when his going into what? Oh my God, he's going into his 6th year. That is crazy.
Yeah, 2018 class is getting older.
That is crazy. So, and I think that could be the same projection for Anthony Richardson, right? He might his first, obviously not, he probably won't start year 1, but year 2, he might have some inaccuracies, but we're going to be just like how people are wild with Josh Allen with his arm and the way he can run the ball. I think we're going to be wild by Anthony Richardson. Like you said, we could be looking 2-3 years down the line and say, this guy was a superstar of the class.
Dude, even if he plays this year, there will be a lot of wow moments. Like, oh my gosh, that was an incredible
because those instincts will take over.
Yes. He has traits that are undeniable and that will translate to the next level. There's no two ways around it. He'll always be an athletic, big, physical quarterback. You know what I mean? He's not going to be not 6'4", 232 with his athleticism and then his arm as well. I think that he definitely has. I feel comfortable saying he has the most electric arm in the class ahead of Levis. And that's, Levis has a really strong arm as well. Levis has a very strong arm, can make any throw on the field, can make difficult throws, opposite hash throws. At times, that gets Levis into trouble, though. I'd say even more so than Richardson. I think Levis is a little bit too aggressive with his arm. It can force him into later throws, thinking that he can fit a ball into windows, causing him to make some turnovers as well. Like I said when we started talking about these guys, they have a lot of similarities. It's two big arm quarterbacks, two physical runners who are in that 6'4", 6'3", 232 range. A lot of it's going to come down to, who a team thinks they can build. For my personal preference, I think Richardson has a lot more upside and is someone that you can really mold into. And like I said, fix some of those minor mechanical issues and turn into an absolute superstar.
Most definitely. So, like I said, it'll be interesting to see how both of these guys, because I think the first test is going to be in the combine. How do these guys do in the combine? And from there, we'll see pro days, who goes where, who's getting invited to go to which teams, will kind of shape where these guys could potentially fall in the first round of the NFL draft. This is the Total Sports Live podcast here on Anchor. This is Jovan joined with Harrison. We're breaking down the quarterback class in the NFL quarterback class in this year's NFL draft. And before we wrap up and move on to talking about some players that we just want to check out in the NFL Combine, we got to talk about who could be the next Skylar Thompson or Brock Purdy. Now, this is a very fun conversation and fun topic just because heading into last year, nobody didn't think that we would see Skylar Thompson and Brock Purdy play meaningful NFL snaps after being drafted in round 7. Shoot, I don't even think none of us saw Anthony Brown, who was an undrafted free agent, get playing time this season behind a guy in Tyler Huntley, who has made a name for himself as a UDA in the NFL. So this question could almost be who could be the next Skylar Thompson, Brock Purdy. Tyler Huntley, Anthony Brown. Like it could be that, but looking at just how those guys perform and just in general, Harrison, when we look at just this year's quarterback class and just the quarterbacks that are in this class, because there's obviously guys that haven't been, invited, to the combine because there's only so many spots available. Who are just a couple of guys who you think could be, the next ones that, this time next year we could be saying, wow, I did not think we would be actually seeing these two guys play meaningful snaps, and they actually did.
I like the back end of this quarterback class. That was something that I said last year as well, talking about guys like Bailey Zappi, who had some success for New England. EJ.
Oh, I forgot about Bailey Zappi.
Bailey Zappi's definitely in that range too.
He definitely did get some time last year. That's a good one. Another one.
Yeah, so I think this is another one. I think, and next year's, we were talking about this pre-show, next year's is going to be even crazier. So many guys went back to school and used up their final year eligibility. Next year's quarterback class is going to be very deep. I think ever since COVID, just every draft class has really been just more stocked with older, more experienced guys, and especially at the quarterback position, that's very valuable. So let's start with a 5-year starter at Louisville, Malik Cunningham. Finished up his career, 7,889 career passing yards. Like I mentioned, 4-year starter. In my humble opinion, this is the best athlete in the quarterback class. I truly believe that. I think that the way that he runs the football this year, before he was injured, missed some time due to injury this year. I believe he missed 2 or 3 games, 3 consecutive games with 100-plus rushing yards, really highlighted by a 127-yard, 2 rushing touchdown performance against Florida State. I'm intrigued by Malik Cunningham. I think he has a lot of upside. Like we were mentioning, it has to be in the right system. It really does. I think that, like we saw with Malik Willis, if he's in a system where they're trying to be a more traditional drop back passing game, you know what I mean? But with that said, though, hold on. Before I say that, Malik Cunningham can absolutely make some challenging throws, opposite hash throws, deep downfield. Like, I think any conversation about him changing position, there's really no need for that. This guy's a guy with a quarterback arm and then elite athleticism to pair with it, can make a lot of plays. I would love to see him come here to Philly in the late rounds, back up Jalen Hurts if Gardner Minshew winds up moving on. I would love to see him go to New Orleans if they wind up going the veteran quarterback route and waiting later in the draft. I think that could be someone they develop. We saw what they've done with Taysom Hill as a mobile quarterback. Get a real mobile quarterback that can throw the football too, see what that can do for your offense. I think Malik Cunningham's a guy with a lot of upside. I'm a big fan of his game. Excellent vision when he's throwing the football, has a lot of vision downfield, makes a lot of good decisions, protects the football as well. That's something that a lot of people are going to be worried about. So, yeah, I'm a big Malik Cunningham fan. I think that's someone who can definitely make plays in the NFL as a quarterback. And then I move on to Tommy DeVito, a Jersey guy, another guy. When we're talking about Brock Purdy, Skylar Thompson, I think if Tommy
DeVito, football journeyman,
started out at Syracuse, lost the job to Garrett Schrader, was their starter in 2019 as a sophomore. Another one, a guy with a lot of college football experience, has played in a lot of games, played in different systems. And that Illinois offense this year was a lot of fun with guys like Chase Brown, Alex Palczewski at right tackle. I'm a big fan of that offense. I think all 3 of those guys will be good draft prospects. When we're looking at DeVito, though, quick, efficient decision maker. That's what I love about him. 20 for 22 against Nebraska, 179 yards, 2 touchdowns, 90% completion percentage in that game. This season, only 4 interceptions, 70% completion percentage. I like the way he operated their offense. I think that'll translate to the NFL. Probably a guy, you know what I mean? He's definitely coming in as a day 3 UDFA guy, definitely coming in as a backup. But like we were saying, if someone had to step up and play in a playoff situation, I think he's someone who could certainly manage your offense and make plays.
And I think if we got down to that point, right, I think both of those guys, depending on the situation and team, could do those things and execute well in their own, various ways. So I definitely love both of them. Malik Cunningham was also drafted in the USFL draft by the Birmingham Stallions. So if the NFL if he doesn't somehow get drafted or, doesn't make a team, he does have another pro opportunity in the USFL with Birmingham.
He'd be a playmaker in the USFL too. He would light that league up and wind up in an NFL training camp this summer. If he had to go play there this year or next year, whenever it would be, he would light that league up. Like I mentioned, with his arm too, he'd be one of the best throwing quarterbacks in that league too. He really is. He's a dynamic playmaker, and I think especially if we're talking about in the USFL, he would really light it up in both phases.
He's like Lamar Jackson, but not Lamar Jackson, right? Lamar with a good passer. Malik's up there, but he's not at Lamar level. Coincidentally, they both went to Louisville. Same school as Teddy Bridgewater. So Louisville starting to putting out the quarterbacks over these last 5 to 7 years. So good to see that. And like you said, Cunningham, Devito, two guys definitely to keep an eye out for him. For me, I only got one guy, and that is, we talked about him earlier. He's on Harrison's list at number 9, and that's Dorian Thompson-Robinson, DTR. He's probably one of my favorite quarterbacks in this draft class. Don't know how I ended up at that point, but it just happened that way. This guy, again, like a Malik Cunningham, 5 years at Louisville, 5 years at UCLA for Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Played in a pro-style offense, spread offense under head coach Chip Kelly. We want a guy. If you want a guy that's a competitor, a dual threat, that he's not really a dual threat in that he runs first, pass second. Like, he's going to stand there and deliver the pocket and make a throw, but he's also going to run when he needs to be. This is the guy that you want. I really like the way that he plays. His last year, he was excellent. 69.6 completion percentage, 3,169 yards, 27 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Also had 645 rushing yards and 12 touchdowns on the ground. Now, some of those came in the quarterback sneak variety, like the Eagles do with Jalen Hurts, but then he had some ridiculous touchdown runs. If you haven't seen the touchdown run that he had against Bowling Green,
State. Okay.
Green, yo, check out the Bowling Green one. He literally rolls out and then somehow takes it up the sideline and then cuts across the middle of the field and takes it for 70-something yards. It's ridiculous. So if you want to check that out, definitely check that out with him. He also had the luxury of playing with some other guys that are pro prospects. Talking about the running back Zach Charbonnet, the wide receiver Jake Bobo, who was also drafted in the USFL draft, and Michael Ezeki, another guy I think who was at the NFLPA Bowl. I think he was at the NFLPA Bowl.
I believe so. Their guard Mofi is really good too.
Yeah, so a lot of pro guys that he played with, and definitely he showed out. And some of the things I like about him, just watching his game, had a chance to watch the Utah game, the Bowling Green game, obviously, in the USC game. His footwork, I think he has very good footwork for his size. Right, he's 6'1", so he's a little bit on the shorter side, but I don't think that matters. I think he had very good footwork. Not a lot of happy feet in the pocket. He's very poised in the pocket. Arm strength, I think, is there. He can hit the throws down the field. It's almost like Jalen Hurts when I watch Dorian Thompson-Robinson, in that he's going to make the deep throws, but he's not consistently, because you don't need him to, because he'll be able to hit those short to intermediate routes, which, again, Jalen Hurts and other quarterbacks have shown you can win that way if you're effective and efficient. You add the dual threat aspect with it. I think he has very good pocket awareness. When he feels pressure, he will step up in the pocket, which I definitely like. He can make the throws behind the line of scrimmage, +1 in the run game. Shout out to Emory Hunt with that one. He's a poor man's Kyler Murray. I see a lot of poor man's Kyler Murray, especially when he takes off and runs. I see a little bit of a Kyler there with him. Without the speed, but I think he has deceptive speed. He's comfortable making throws, throws on the move. He throws a good ball, like I said. He goes through his progressions, I think, very well. And he has a lot of zip on his passes. He can make middle field throws, but it could be an issue because he's inconsistent there. But I do love that he's a competitor. That's one thing I did watch when I watched DTR. Dude competes. He really competes. And he was at the Shrine game, and he's going to be at the Combine. This guy might become the way I feel about Tyler Huntley is going to be the way I feel about DTR. I'm going to be rooting for him because I really think he can play at the NFL level. And I think I told Emory that, and I've told you that, right? I told Emory that. I said, this guy could have a Tyler Huntley, Tyrod Taylor type of career, where they're back up for a minute, but he will get a chance to start, because I think he can start. And, him having a head coach in Chip Kelly who did have some NFL stuff, experience, I think that helps him. And I even have, some places where I think I would like to see him go, honestly. We talked about this one team, Seattle. I'd love to see him Seattle.
Yep.
The Eagles, just my bias. I like to see him the Eagles. Right. The Commanders with Eric Bieniemy. I think just with the concepts that they ran at UCLA, I could see him running the same similar concepts with the Commanders. The Broncos with Russell Wilson getting older. And then the Browns. No Jacoby Brissett. You have a backup behind Deshaun Watson. And that offense, really, you don't really need to do a lot because they lean so much on the running game. So I really like DTR. I think he's going to be another fascinating player to watch, just to see where he goes at, because I think he can play. Like I said, he's a competitor. He reminds me a lot of PJ Walker too when I watch him. So
I like that comp.
I'm enamored with him. I think he's really going to be a good pro for some reason. I just feel it, just the way. And I didn't think that until I watched him in the NFL, and I mean in the Shrine game, where I was like, yeah, this dude actually might be that dude that no one's talking about, but will like shoot up the draft boards.
He did. He had a really good week at the Shrine game and just in practice as well. And that's not even necessarily his forte, because when he's in a full game live situation, he can really display his full set of athleticism, the way he moves the pocket. I love that you mentioned that. He's one of my favorite guys, pocket movement, so comfortable in the pocket, likes to step up and throw from the pocket, hit routes on the outside. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned his efficiency. His 69% completion percentage was a UCLA school record. He leaves there with almost all of their all-time total offense record, like we mentioned, 5-year starter there.
And there's some good quarterbacks that kind of
some
thrown
good
through
quarterbacks
you.
that have come
Josh
through.
Rosen, a guy named Troy Aikman. So I mean,
yes, DTR has all of those offensive records. And then this year, he was only one of 2 quarterbacks in the FBS to finish with 25 passing touchdowns and 11 rushing touchdowns with Bo Nix from Oregon. Big fan of DTR as well. I think he's got a lot of upside for the next level, kind of getting slept on. Another guy similar to maybe Bryce Young in terms of a size situation where people are like, well, he's too small. He's not going to be able to play in the NFL. I think that's definitely overlooked. Same thing with Lindsey Scott, who I have at 11 from UIW. Not really concerned with their size, really more so looking at the way they throw the football, the way they can move, extend plays, and make plays in the open field. Definitely playmakers in the NFL.
And the way that the NFL game and offenses have changed now to the more spread college style, offenses, it benefits a guy like DTR or like a Malik Cunningham or Anthony Richardson or Lindsey Scott. Like, you need more. I think we're starting to see that even in NFL now. You need more guys that can move the pocket, not be so stiff. Like, they got to have some mobility to be successful. And the guys that we listed and we talked about tonight definitely are that next wave of quarterbacks. So it's going to be fun, to see where these guys go, to see how they perform in the combine on Saturday. Should be a fun one. And before we wrap up here, let's talk about the NFL combine. Combine starts this week on drill starting on Thursday. So we got some guys that we're looking forward to checking out during the combine. Harrison, who are some guys that you have on your list that you want to look out for?
Some guys I have on my list. Let's start with one that I'm a homer for. Anybody who knows me knows I've been a big Andre Lousivilles fan for a while from down at Princeton. All-American track runner there in the heptathlon and NCAA champion. I think that's going to translate to the 40. Not too much needs to be said there. I think he's got a lot of upside for the NFL. Really, I think that 40 could be something that really starts to get people talking about Lousivilles. And then looking at the bench, I really like the way Henry Bainavalu, I think his frame is built to just throw around that 225 and that 6'7", 330 range. Also think DeJuan Jones at like 6'8", 360 should put up some pretty good numbers, throwing around 225 on the bench. We talked about it. I'm really excited to see Anthony Richardson on the field for obvious reasons. I think he's got an electric arm. I think that he'll certainly light it up. Same thing with Levis. I think Levis is going to throw the ball well. And like I mentioned in the beginning of the show, CJ Stroud is going to put on a show with his pinpoint accuracy. Really love the way he throws the ball. I think he would be a really good fit for the Colts and what Shane Steichen does. Shane Steichen worked with Phillip Rivers for years. I think CJ Stroud, kind of similar frame, similar touch pass wise. Really excited to see him throw. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a fun combine. I'm looking forward to see all those guys. I also think just athletic freak-wise, Andre Carter from Army should put up some crazy numbers on like the broad jump and maybe his 10-yard splits, vert, just things of that nature. I think Andre Carter is an athletic freak. So combine's always fun. Should be fun to see what the numbers are.
Definitely. And for me, in addition to DTR, right, I wish Xavier Ballade was here because I really like the way that he ran the ball in the Shrine game. But for me, I'm really just looking at to see what Keaton Mitchell does out of Eastern Carolina. This guy, when you search Keaton Mitchell name up on Google, you will see a lot of speed things attached to him and how fast he is and how fast he can run. And I think this is another guy, right, when we talk about 40-yard times, like he could be the one that puts his name, on a map, right? Because we look at just the running backs in this year's draft class, and specifically that probably will be doing the 40-yard dash. You're probably looking at he might be the fastest guy, maybe outside of a Kendry Miller or a lot of people probably want to see Tajay Spears run or Deuce
Yeah.
Vaughn because of their size, or even a Devin Chain at his size and his playmaking. People want to see him run. But I think Keaton Mitchell, if he runs a very good time, he could be a guy that probably sparks up a little bit of some draft interest because he's already got drafted in USFL. He was drafted in USFL late last month. So he's another guy that I'm watching out for at the combine. So yeah, should be a fun one. Can't wait to see how it all unfolds. Step 1 of the NFL draft process will begin there, and then it will continue. Well, it's not step 1 because we got through all the all-star game circuit. So this is like step 2, and then we'll get to the pro days, and then the mock drafts and all the rumors, the reports, the free agency signings, all that good stuff will all come down to draft night. We'll probably see some movement and shaking because it always happens, right? There's always some blockbuster trade goes down that kind of shakes up the board, and it'll be good. It'll be fun to see how it all shakes out and where all these quarterbacks go in this year draft class. So should be a good one. So that's going to wrap up this week's edition of the podcast. Really appreciate anyone that tuned in or that will be checking out this podcast. Again, make sure you're following us on Twitter at Total Sports Live. Make sure you're checking out TotalSportsLive.com. Checking out the podcast on Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, and lastly on Anchor. All you got to do is search TSL Podcast, Total Sports Live. All you got to do is do that. You'll do that. All the podcasts will come up right there. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. Harrison Brown-Russo on YouTube. That's all you got to do. Hit that subscribe button. And always, if you want to follow us on Twitter, at Jovan10, scrolling across the screen if you're watching us on YouTube, at Jovan10 and at Harry Brown-Russo. I think that's it, Harrison. I think we've wrapped up the quarterback position nicely. We might have to come back and do running backs next week. Who knows? Or we'll talk about XFL. We don't know. Something will be going on this podcast.
You know where to find me for either one of those, man. I'm always around. Definitely a good podcast with you talking about these quarterbacks. Like we said, talented quarterback class. I think there's a lot of guys that are going to make plays in the NFL. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, definitely will be looking forward to it. So for me and Harrison, everyone have a good one, and we will talk to you all very soon. Enjoy the combine. We'll see what happens. Have a good one.